Well, chaps, the 80th anniversary of 1940, of course, carries on, and in particular the Battle of Britain. It's August 7th, 1940. Just use your imagination. And in the past few days, bad weather has largely hindered Luftwaffe operations, a combination of dense cloud and rain and whatnot. And the British have lost pilots, but purely few accident. I think I read a statistic once somewhere that more pilots were actually lost in accident than enemy action during the Battle of Britain. Either way, people have crashed on takeoff, or they've gone missing in fog and whatnot. So it's still a dangerous time if you're in fighter command. But curiously, the Luftwaffe have continued to lose pilots as well. And as I said before, they are flying aircraft for the most part, obviously excluding 109s, that have multiple men to a crew. And if they've lost one of those planes, then they've lost a few men. So the Luftwaffe losses have still daily anyway outstripped, not by much to be fair, the British losses. When I say British losses, I'm really including the foreign volunteers that have joined up. By now, fire command are taking whoever wants to fight, really. You've got the Americans have come over, with America still technically neutral. I say technically because there's various sort of loopholes and whatnot. And they had to pretend to be, they had to register as Canadian or some such. And many of them actually went from the USA into Canada and then over to here. And if you go into Grosvenor Square, where the former American embassy used to be until 2017, facing the statue of Franklin Delano Roosevelt is a little sort of statue, a few feet high, dedicated to the Eagle Squadron pilots, and those were the Americans who came over from the USA to fight for us, or fight for Britain back in the day. At some point in the war, I think it was about middle of 1942, late 1942, the Americans that were still serving in the Royal Air Force were effectively told they had to join the US Army Air Force, as it was in those days, the US AAF, and well, it was the US Army Air Corps at some point, and then became the Army Air Force, and of course after the war, the USAF. Somebody can correct me on that, but it's rather. And so they had to join up, and so the Americans sort of sidestepped. But it's fair enough, I suppose. America was in the war by then. And yeah, from the sounds of it, there were still Americans in the RAF after that. There was an American in the 617 Squadron in May 1943 for the Dams Raid, Operation Chastise. And The Great Escape shows James Garner, Steve McQueen, and the other chap in RAF uniform, and that film was set in 1944. So I don't know. But apart from the Americans, of course, and indeed they far outstripped the Americans, are the likes of the Czechs, the Poles, the Free French, the Belgians, the Dutch, those from Africa, those from Jamaica. Well, there was only one chap from Jamaica, but you had Australians and New Zealanders and Canadians. Even there was a couple of Germans who had come over from Germany before the war, fleeing the Nazis. So, as much as we still today in this country go, the Battle of Britain, run by British chaps, and indeed the official history of the RAF said that when the memories of the fighting grow dim, people will still remember that we were saved by 1,000 British lads or something like that. The top 10 aces of the Battle of Britain largely constitute non-British pilots, mostly Poles at that. The Poles had a somewhat unique way, really, compared to British fighting, of dealing with hindcrawl formations, say. The British, the RAF chaps have been taught how to do this and the other. Now, the Poles were technically taught the same thing, but, emotion at the fact that the nation's been overrun and utilised by the Nazis, they would sort of just attack the formation head on and fly right into them. And they scared the living shit out of the Germans because these guys look suicidal. There is a memorial near RAF Northolt, which is still an active Air Force base, and it's sort of like where sometimes all family land or take off from. And there's a memorial to the Polish chaps there. And the Battle of Britain Memorial, as I say, if I'm in the area, I'll have a look at it, even though I've seen it many times since it opened in 2005, when there was about 60 members of the few accompanying Prince Charles. And yeah, the British names probably outnumber any other nationality on it, but as I say, a great many men, for whatever reason, came over here and said, yeah, I want to slaughter Hitler. And I find it awfully humbling. Britain was on the ropes. It wasn't out, but it was on the ropes and was fighting for survival. And yes, the Empire probably kept it going, you know, supplying food and fuel and whatever, but to the outside world, Europe was now coloured black with a white swastika over it, and there's a little island, and they're holding out. So the battle of Britain soon is going to ramp into its next stage on the 13th, Adlertag, Eagle Day, and that's when the Luftwaffe will take the gloves off effectively, stop bombing the convoys and going after certain other things and just going out for fight command. But soon after that, Winston Churchill will make his the few speech, and the trouble with the few is that they get fewer. As Richard Burton said in The Longest Day, we only have one pilot out of every single person that flew in the Battle of Britain between July and October. So there have been civilian deaths and casualties. Exeter was bombed on August 7th, 1940. Little damage was done though, but the likes of Plymouth, Hull, Sheffield, Belfast, Birmingham, and other places away from London will get bombed by the time the Blitz is over in May 1941. London is technically off limits on Hitler's orders, but accidents happen, and they frequently did with the Luftwaffe, and that's what changed the war when Hitler switched direction to London on September the 7th. So a little way from that, but all that and more, hopefully, to come at some point, he says.